Welcome to the Fourth Branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. John F. Kennedy said, "The ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all." Hello everyone, I am MD, and this is the Fourth Branch program. First, a warning. This program is not suitable to all audiences. I repeat, the content of this program is not for everyone. To find out whether you're able to follow or to continue watching this program, answer the following two questions. Question number one: would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? Question number two: would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? Once again, would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? And question number two: would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? Your time is up. If you had difficulty answering either question, this program is not for you. If you answer yes to either or both questions, this program is definitely not for you. But if your answers are absolutely not to both questions, stick around. This is a program catered exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. If you're still here, it tells me that you may have, or you have, a certain level of decency and a high degree of morality. This program is for you. I'll be right back. Yesterday, we began the conversation in regards to the Brett Kavanaugh nomination. Interestingly enough, we started it with people traveling from the world across to come to the United States. Now, it is relevant to the conversation. And the reason is because despite the fact that people from all over the world come here, some because there were persecuted, political persecution, some are looking for financial, to change their financial situation. And there are a number of other reasons people come here, vacation and so on and so forth. But as we explained in episode 2, most people who come here to the United States, even when they leave, but they are very inclined to come back to the United States, and those who extend their visa usually do so not just because of financial reason, not just because of political reason, but people are more inclined to stay right here in the United States because of the system of justice we have here. So it is not totally unrelated that the current conversation in regards to Brett Kavanaugh is something that is related to the conversation of people traveling from the world across to come here. It is that important. Tonight, we continue with the conversation as to not only the fact that people come here for vacation, for health, for financial, for political, for politics, but they also come here because they like the system of justice we have. And that is usually strengthened by the Supreme Court. Because as you know, the Supreme Court has the last word on everything. So to place someone on the Supreme Court is not a light exercise. It's not an exercise that we American citizens should take lightly, because the individuals will impact our lives, the lives of our children, our grandchildren, and the lives of children of generations to come. So it is not unrelated, and it is absolutely important that we pay very close attention to the progress on the Brett Kavanaugh nomination. Stay tuned. We'll be right back to continue the conversation. It will be episode 3 of the conversation on the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. The reason people from the world across travel to the United States of America for visit, for study, for health, for whatever the reason is, and decide to stay is because there is a system of government, a system of democracy that they like, that guarantees them, no matter how bad things look, it will be resolved properly. And the reason that is because we have a system of law. We call it the rule of law, which states that everybody, including the President of the United States, everybody is under the law. And because of that, no matter what your social status is, no matter where you're from, no matter your race, religion. If you are right here in the United States of America and something that has to do with the law happens, you can almost rest assured it will be resolved. Now, in the example that I just gave you, the gentleman did spend quite some time in Guantanamo unjustly, but in the end, it was resolved. Of course, he would feel differently because of all the time that he had spent there for no reason whatsoever. So when that aspect of life in the United States is over, if it is no longer true that people can come to the United States and to be assured things will sort out, not only they will no longer come, but the country will no longer be a country in which we would want to raise our children, our grandchildren. For the past couple of decades, the erosion of us, the erosion of democracy in the United States has been pretty obvious. Now, the framers of the constitutions knew what they were doing. They weren't perfect, but they knew what they were doing. Both the executive branch and the legislative branch are political branches. Now, they did put a lot of trust on people's decency, on patriotism. So when they crafted that constitution, they could not, because they all were patriots. They left England. They left a system where kings, emperors were the one running their lives. They didn't have any say over their own lives. Now, they created a country, they created a form of government which would be very different, which would be just the opposite of what they left behind. Because in a kings and emperors, whatever they said goes. If they say to kill an individual, nobody asks question. If they say to arrest an individual, nobody asks question, because whatever the king, the queen, the emperor, whatever they said at that time, the people who serve who serve them, their subordinates have to carry out whatever their wishes were. In fact, we even have a passage in the Bible where, according to that passage, that one of the sin was someone asking the king for the head of a prophet. But because the king had full power, and they said, according to the story, the king was saddened, but the king had wanted to please a lady. So the head of John the Baptist was brought to the king on a platter. You can believe or not believe the story, but that's not really the point. So the framers of the Constitution knows that both the executive branch and the legislative branch would be very much involved in a lot of politics. So what they did is they make it such that they can hash out those details with the people. So we elect president, we elect senators, we elect congressmen. but we do not elect judges. That's the judiciary branch. The judges are appointed by the president. And they were also smart enough to give the president that kind of power, but also to remove and try to detach the judges from the executive branch. And the way that they did that is by saying that when you elect a judge in the Supreme Court, you elect a judge for his or her lifetime. So in other words, that individual, once elected, should not have to go back to that individual who sits in the Oval Office and try to return favor to that individual. And the reason that a judge was spared from the political sin of election is because, as you can see, senators, congressmen, president, there are a lot of corruption. And today, especially today, when you look at the amount of corruption in those two branches of our government, to expose judges in that system of corruption would have made our system of democracy not any better than any third world country. So the framers of the Constitution say, and they actually had the right idea. The president elected by the people, however, the legislative branch, both houses, Congress and the Senate, they have a certain degree of control over the executive branch, because the executive branch comes from the population, civilian. Anybody can run for president as long as you meet only the very simple criteria. Really, there are not a lot of requirements for being president. You have to be a US born citizen. You have to have been in the country for your life, or at least not be outside the country. I don't remember exactly if it's 20, 30 plus years. And of course you have to be at least 35. So the requirements are not, they're not that many requirements for anybody to run for president. We have the example right here in the United States now. Trump was never a politician. He ran for president, he became president of the United States. So especially at the time that the framers of the Constitution were crafting our Constitution, they know that there was a possibility that you could have someone who become president and that person would be a rogue agent, would be an agent of a foreign government. In that case, they were only looking at England, but they know that possibility existed, and that this person who becomes president could be unfit to be president. They have all that addressed in the Constitution. What I believe, and I said that several times, that the framers of the Constitution must have not thought about at least a couple of things. Number one, that the legislative branch would at some point go to a single political party. That's number one. And number two, that people who serve in those two houses would be taking action that are completely unpatriotic. And I think they base the decision or thinking that everybody who is an American citizen who is going to serve as a congressman or a senator, that individual would undoubtedly a patriot. I think they made they did foresee that there could be individual sitting, an individual who becomes a senator or a congressman or even a president who would not be a patriot. I think they may have thought of a president being in that category. But I don't think, even if they thought that could have been the case, because they had structured three equal branches of government, independent of each other, which means the president doesn't tell Congress what to do. The president doesn't tell the Senate what to do. The president doesn't tell the Supreme Court what to do. Once the president appoints a justice, that's the end of the story. That's the end of the line. At least that's the way the framers of the Constitution intended it to. But unfortunately, as you can see, we have, first of all, a president of the United States. The first thing that happened to someone who becomes president of the United States is to swear to take an oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the United States. That's the first thing that happened. Raise your hand and repeat after me. That's the first thing that happened. No matter where you stand today in terms of support, which political party you belong to, if you are a sound-minded individual, you know that we protect our Constitution is not something that in Donald Trump playbook. That is of no importance to him. You may like it, but I'm referring to individual, sound-minded individual. That's why I said from the very beginning of this video that it is not for everyone, because the purpose of the fourth branch is to try to get to a perfect union, and I cannot rely on an individual, or the country cannot rely on individuals who are not sound-minded. So we know that the idea of upholding the Constitution of the United States, the idea of protecting our Constitution, this is not being done by the President of the United States. But what is worse is the fact that we also know that the legislative branch, who unfortunately is led today by Republicans, both houses, both the Congress and the Senate, are led by the Republican Party. And any sound-minded American would say that they are not fulfilling the task for which they were elected. Yes, you may like it because it may serve your purpose. You may like it because, well, I like the idea that they are not paying attention to the Constitution. I like the idea that they just trampling our Constitution. But as I always say to everyone who seem to think it's okay for Republicans to do that, would you feel the same way when the shoe is on the other foot? Now, if not, that means you at least are sound-minded and you realize the problem, and doing nothing is not acceptable. Because if you believe that it's not good for the country, or it would have not been good for the country had the Democrats be in that predicament and doing what Republicans are currently doing, that would be bad for our country, that would be mean trampling our constitution, then you cannot be okay with the Republicans doing it if you believe it's wrong. And unfortunately, that's what's going on. Now, the reason that part is also important, it's because we call, the framers of the Constitution call the houses the legislative branch. It's because laws in the country come from the legislative branch. Laws that you've seen in the country. When blacks were slaves, when the emancipation occurred, when civil rights were passed, and so on, everything started in the legislative branch. Granted that whatever document that legislative branch comes with has to go to the president's desk to be signed. So the framers of the Constitution wanted a certain collaboration between the executive branch and the legislative branch. Congress come with something, whatever that is, passes it, it goes to the Senate. The Senate look at it, likes it, doesn't like it. If the Senate doesn't like it, they make some correction, they suggest some correction, and send it back to Congress, which will implement those whatever the Senate wants. Or sometimes Senate only wants to add something to it, but would send it back to Congress so that they can agree to it, or even remove whatever that they said before, and they will send it back to the Senate again. And after it passes back and forth between those two sides, once everything is per the two houses, then it will go into the president's desk, who will sign it or not, because the president may decide not to. That's when the idea of the president veto a bill, which means the houses pass whatever that is. I'll give you an example. For instance, the tax cut. The houses could have passed the tax cut because everything originated there. Congress, Senate, Congress, Senate, and then when they send it to the president's desk, the president would have said, no, I'm not signing it. In fact, we have a similar example during the Obama administration, where Congress and Senate, which were also in the hands of the Republican, they passed a bill to try to kill Obamacare. So of course, when they sent it to Obama's desk, it would not go anywhere because the president has the veto power. No, that bill is not going anywhere. Now, without having to give you to go through a study of the Constitution, the president veto a bill, but if the Senate can manage to get 2/3 of its members, they can pass that bill. Meaning that the president could have said, in the case of Obama, Obama vetoed a bill that the Senate sent to him about killing Obamacare. But if the Republican could gather 2/3 of the Senate to go along with the idea of killing Obamacare, they could have easily done that without the president. So the executive branch and the legislative branch work together, and we have laws in this country. Now, the executive branch is supposed to enforce the law. So whatever law, despite the fact that whatever act is going to go to the president, to the executive branch to be signed, but once it is signed, it becomes law. Then now the executive branch job is to make sure that that law is enforced. And it so happened the executive branch has the Department of Justice to do that for him. So where does the justice comes into the picture? The justice is appointed by the president. So the president decides to pick someone. Well, not just anybody on the street. The person has to meet qualification necessary to become a justice. Not that it matters nowadays, because we have an instance of a nominee that actually went through the Congress and the Senate, an individual who became a judge in the United States of America who has never even tried a case. In a normal administration, that would have never happened. But remember, the White House is occupied by a Republican. Both houses, Congress and the Senate, belong to the Republican. Now, the framers of the Constitution never seen that. I don't think they saw that coming. How could you have a judge, someone who's going to make decisions that impacts people's lives, know nothing about the law? Has never tried a case. I never represented anybody. It's someone who simply has a law degree, no experience whatsoever. But because both Congress and the Senate are led by the Republican, Trump appointed the individual and they just put the person through. And that's what is actually being done. And why should it be of concern to you? Why should it be of concern to you? Or can you see why it should be of concern to you? Well, it should be of concern to you because someone sitting on the court who is making decision not just about your lives, but about the whole nation's lives, your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids. That individual cannot just be anybody. You cannot just put anybody there, not because the person is a Republican, not because the person is leaning Republican. You cannot just decide to put just anybody on the court. Stay with me. I'll be right back. Donald Trump is wrong to call the media the enemy of the country. Adolf Hitler did exactly the same thing in 1933. Journalists are not in the business of fairness. Our business, our only business, is to be objective. It is our duty to hold Trump and every administration accountable. Today, it is urgent, it is necessary, it is critical. Our very freedom depends on it.
After reading several books based on presidents and on Obama specifically, I found that they're typically partisan. The Obama legacy targets the heart of the issue by giving credit to the president where it's due, but definitely coming down hard on Obama on his bigger failures, like his handling of the Syrian crisis.
If you are in college, going to college, you are an educator, a faculty member, or someone with interest in government or politics, The Obama Legacy is definitely a book to read.
My professor recommended The Obama Legacy.
A friend actually recommended The Obama Legacy.
I would highly recommend this book for anyone, whether for academic use or leisure reading.
I would recommend this book to anyone out there searching for an impartial and unbiased look into Barack Obama's tenure as president.
I would definitely recommend this book as a good read for both liberals and conservatives.
Don't go anywhere. The Fourth Branch program will return in just a moment.
You got just what I need. Everything for my home, you got it for me. I never see selection quite like this. Every color and size in my mind. They got every single thing on my list. And with 70% off, who knows what I'll find. Wayfair, you got just what I need. Everything for my home, you got it for me. Wayfair, and the shipping was free. Now my home's the home I want.
From all of us at Wayfair, find what you need today.
I do thank you for watching this episode 3 of the Brett Kavanaugh nomination. We will return tomorrow with episode 4 to continue the conversation in terms of what does it mean for the vote on Brett Kavanaugh to be seated on the Supreme Court. Should you be concerned? Should you be involved? Should it matter? Have a good afternoon or a good evening, whichever it happened to be. I am MD, and this is the Fourth Branch program. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.